Hello, my friend. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Enneagram and Marriage Podcast. I'm so excited for this Valentine's week of episodes, chock full of love, encouragement, and even some fun on an intimate level where we're going to have some opportunities to dig in class together for those who want an Enneagram intensive. So stay tuned for that at the end of the episode. But right here and now, just thank you for pressing play because we're talking today about perfect timing, when to have hard conversations in marriage. Sometimes these are needed for that deeper dive love experience that so many want on Valentine's Day. And yet, so many, as we see across social media and elsewhere in movies, people are just jaded, right? They're like, we don't have fun Valentines because we have issues and we're real people. And I'm here to tell you, you can both be real people with real issues and have really good times together. So I want to help you to get there. And I'm so excited whenever you're listening live or in the future. I know you're like, no, it's now for me. Whenever you're listening, just thank you. Be present with me here as we walk through these ways. We're going to talk about some very cool general ways to have the best timing for conversations across all levels of my marriage therapy research, as well as the Enneagram itself. If you're a heart, head, or body type, 234 heart, head 567, or 891 body. So, in addition to that, we always start off with a marriage minute, and today's marriage minute centers around our reflections on actually the Bridge of Life 5K run that my family and I did this past weekend. So, first and foremost, what a beautiful way to see people across every type sharing their gifts. It was a 2-8 couple who started the Bridge of Life. There's an 8 who runs it. I know a 6 who's on the team. There are so many people volunteering of every type, hundreds, to pull off this event with thousands this weekend. And it was in Sarasota, Florida. And it was just a beautiful time to see every child's name chalked on the sidewalk who has been adopted in our county, and many of them there present, walking and running alongside of us. It was so beautiful to see them looking for their names and just running their hardest. So beautiful, walking, running, and also just noticing that it's okay to be different types. As a 7, I was thinking how I found myself quietly encouraging the people around me, sometimes even just with a prayerful look or a noticing of my son who doesn't usually do this and noticing he needed headphones, noticing my daughter as a heart type wanted to be with and be present, and also noticing that she wanted to spend time just connecting with everybody around her. And if even it meant that she would have to slow down, she didn't mind at all. Then there was Wes, who is social, and he's really excited to share with everybody about how he can encourage them. He has a lot of energy and he is happy to share loudly. And I saw him encourage one of my friend's children, adopted children, and she was just having so much fun on the race. And then I saw my type 2 friend, and she was serving by showing up early and doing the registration table. Amy, she's a 2-wing 1, and her daughter, who's a 5, handing out the awards. It was just neat to see everybody in their favorite introverted or extroverted style. And it reminded me how marriage works best when we understand and appreciate the differences. Also, my 9, Melody, had a huge weekend. And I told you I'd be talking a lot about her these days, but she sent us a message with a picture of her with her sleep mask on saying, hey, I had a long dance practice the night before, and I have a long dance recital tonight with my debut of my choreographed piece. And she's like, here I am in bed. Good morning. Having a lovely day quietly, getting ready and not doing this run with you. So that was her way of making sure that she also contributed to the family in a different way. So understand, guys, that sometimes your family is going to do things different from you. And that means your partner. And sometimes you're going to be running on the same track. Wes loves when I'm super social. And I was super social this weekend with both that and then going to a church to speak to a women's group right after that. He was all in. And then we got to participate with first me taking a nap and then Melody's amazing event that I'll share more about on Wednesday. But this is for you now to think on what is something that I notice my partner and I just do and approach differently, but I'm starting to appreciate. I'm taking a moment now with you, Krista, to just remember how actually cool that is that we have a different style and approach and we can teach each other. So let's talk now about our main topic and allow ourselves to fall into the best timing when we actually have a harder conversation to have. Because you heard me say this is a light and fun moment. But what about when it's tough? When should we approach? And there's, of course, a few general rules. Make sure that you are not going for this during a time when your partner says, for me, this is not a good time. Maybe they say when I'm sick or have a migraine headache, of course, or they're in great pain, or you are in a moment where they're like, I haven't slept in days. That can happen with some people in some jobs or after a big launch of some sort. So just make sure you're mindful of the general rules for your family. You may have somebody who's hangry at times and they need to be well fed. You're going to have to learn that together on what's best for them. But in general, you're going to want to avoid criticism during the first 3 minutes. You're going to want to set up the 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio. We talk a lot about in this podcast from Gottman. And also the soft startup approach Gottman talks about to say, let's not be harsh at the beginning. So that goes along with avoiding the 3 criticisms. Another period of time that people often forget is that we don't want to compound one conflict on top of the next with our negative chaining, where we're saying, well, this happened and then this could happen and then this could happen. Instead, we have to probably bring our spiritual life in at some point too, if you're somebody like me who can negatively chain. And then you have this time of a deep breath, opening your hands to God and just allowing yourself to release some of that control that can build up. And that will also go with this, that we don't want to bring up conflicts inside of a 3 hour period of time if we've already had one within a 3 hour period of time. Um, and then last on the Gottman reminders is when somebody's flooded, has this elevated heart rate, which is very common if you're just getting all excited and your passion is starting to get into rage. This is a moment to say, I'm going to take a 30-minute breather and not bring up hard conversations or even allow myself to stop one. Now, according to my master's thesis of emotionally focused therapy with the late Sue Johnson, we know that safety must be established first, too. You have to believe that your partner's going to look at you, think about you, talk to you. So you can ask them, is this a good time? Or when would be a good time this week? Hey, you said this was a good time this week. I'm really eager to feel safer together, but I want to ensure that that's a reality. Is this a good time for you? And if you just keep running into no, it is okay and healthy to do deeper dives with somebody like me or in my practice or in your own practice where you find somebody in your area to do some work with you, whether Zoom or actually in person for many of you. Now, the other piece is that both partners want to access vulnerability to be able to say, here's my attachment needs, here's what I'm really feeling inside, not during the primal panic state. So the difference would be that if you're in the primal panic state, you would allow yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to need some self soothing before we get into the actual hard conversation. Can you help me to feel safe with you? And if they say, no, I'm just too grouchy right now, which happens sometimes because they're also frustrated, then you can say, I'm going to do some self soothing myself. Let me take a walk. Let me take a moment, that kind of a thing. So you both want to be able to access the vulnerable spot. And that takes that self-care piece first, which is why I talk about it so much. Oh my gosh, I have to talk about that all the time. I mentioned that at the church on Sunday or Saturday when I was speaking as well to say, hey, if you are looking to work on personality and top level issues, but the partner you're with is feeling like they're running from a fire or from a bear, the way the brain is wired, then they're not going to be able to focus at all. So just know that that's not something against you. It's they need to feel safe. So help them to feel safe, lower your voice, allow yourself to co-regulate with them a little bit and let them feel safe. Even if you're feeling like, hey, I'm not showing up as super powerful right now, your power comes from places of patience and slowing down. So that is power. Now, when we look at another area, I don't want to forget the whole internal system inside of you. We've talked about internal family systems here as well, but just remembering that there's a lot of the work that you can do on your own before you have all the hard combos with your partner. That's super important to remember. So just asking yourself first, I know I need to have a hard conversation, but is that with me or my partner, or maybe both? And starting off, Internal Family Systems by Richard Schwartz would say, start off with you and do some journaling, do some exploring with God. Allow yourself to come into that space of noticing whether the hard conversation is one that really can be solved all within yourself. And also, that, of course, that, if you guys are already triggered a lot, doing that with a therapist or coach, remembering perhaps morning could be better for clarity before you pick up cell phones or before you get lost in your cell phones. These are awesome practices to remember. So just remember that self energy. Remember to spend some time spiritually with God. Remember that you are allowed to protect your parts too. If you're part of you is saying internally, I don't want to have the hard conversation because you know what always happens. I always fawn and then I'm not feeling true to myself. You can allow yourself to even dig in that way and say, okay, thankfully I'm taking some time first. So I'm going to pivot a little differently that if this happens, I'm going to withdraw for 30 minutes. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to change to text. I'm going to allow myself to excuse myself for something versus like, okay, I'm going to fawn or I'm going to yell. So allowing yourself a bit of that IFS helps. And then also noticing your own cognitive distortions can help a lot too. So, am I negatively chaining? Am I choosing to think negative? Is the narrative I'm telling actually fair? Knowing that we're all biased at times and we have that fundamental attribution error. Am I doing that right now? Am I actually taking part in believing that I'm healthier and that they're not, or they're weaker and I'm stronger? When in reality, I could be saying, oh, they have gifts, I have gifts. I'm allowing myself to remember sometimes my partner might be stressed because of sleep or hormones or eating, and same with me, and allowing us to have the hard combos when we're in better places for that, because that can be everything. Just saying to yourself, I really loved having time with you today, but I do need to have a hard conversation. And then your spouse says, I'm feeling really hormonal today. That's already not on you. That's just, oh, thank you for telling me. Then we can have that conversation tomorrow. And if the issue has to be solved urgently, at least you now have an awareness of the overlay that's with you, so that if your spouse is extra cranky, you can say that narrative to yourself. I'm really grateful they're willing to talk this out with me. This was urgent, but I know they're not at their best. So also understand that when people are talking to you, they're not going to always have just a centric view of you and them. They're thinking of your kids. For women, this is especially powerful. There's often a lot of women who are doing a lot of emotional mental load pieces where they're taking that deeper dive into, like, I have to make sure this is cared for, this, or extended family. So just allow yourself to realize that we don't want to fuse with outside members of the family. We want to have clear boundaries, but we also know sometimes we do have trauma work to do. So we may have to be more patient with each other as we work out what's really healthy for each of us. And then remember, no one's going to want to change if you're like, I am not accepting of you the way you are. I need you to change. It's the irony of allowing people to be who they are and loving them right there that then gives them the power to say, I think I'll change. And I can remember that once way back when, Wes and I have had just a few moments of doing marriage therapy. And one of these key moments, and some of our therapists were better than others. I thought this one was pretty good. Wes didn't think she was as good as I did, but I thought she was fantastic. And she said, here's a boundary I want Wes to set with his external family. If he's comfortable, I said, I want that too. And then he said, no, no, no. And then we both backed off. And I especially backed off. I was like, okay, Wes, we have little girls. We didn't even have Jack at the time. I said, if you cannot do this boundary, I still love you. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. It wasn't anything, make or break me. But then he's like, stop, wait. I actually know this is the right thing. It's just, I think he just needed us to back off, if that makes sense, and make it his own. So just noticing that when you instead provide that unconditional positive regard that Rogers talked about, wow, a lot can happen. It was powerful for me to see that both as a therapist, but then here in this moment, just as a wife. Okay, so yes, we already talked about all these physiological states, environmental factors, and a couple of Enneagram reminders are if you're a heart type, 2, 3, or 4, you might need to really allow each other that space to feel like you are so given attention and loved. If you're a heart type, like know that your heart type spouse, 2, 3, or 4, needs that time and attention. I know you don't want to give it sometimes because you're like, I'm busy serving them in another way, but just know that that's going to be the main request usually is time and attention. And just knowing that's important to them can help you versus trying to finagle out of it. At least negotiate for that. 5, 6, and 7, there's going to be this need for some urgency in processing so we can feel safe, but also some people feel safe that they know you're not going to rush me when I need time to think. I'm a thinking type. I'm going to need time to mull something over and allow myself to sit with it for a bit and feel comfortable before I say yes. And then lastly, our body triad, often they say, I'm going to say no first to everything because they're like, I don't want you to take power over me. I feel this instinct about what's right and wrong for my life, and I don't want to have anyone muddy that. So if you're an instinct type or if you're the partner of one, knowing oftentimes they say no, and then they come back and they think it through. And that's what I want you to do is come into your heart and your thinking, whatever your triad, allow yourself some space to really come inside of some expansiveness between those triads so you can be relational, safe, and good. Now, if you're resonating with these instincts about how we should go about our timing for our conflicts. If you're resonating with just, we need extra help, Krista, we are in a struggle point. I want you to know I'm leading the Enneagram Relationship Intensive, deepening your love and intimacy together across 6 weeks. It starts February 27th, and I'm limiting it to a small group of couples because I want to ensure personalized attention for your unique type combination. Oftentimes, I have to do everything so generally. So, this is going to be a first come, first serve event with limited participation. And we're going to deeply get into these communication patterns that you're having, conflict resolution, lasting connection. You can find everything about that in the show notes. But let's get you prepped for your Valentine's Day as you remember that understanding your type, understanding the ways to feel safe and good and loved are so key. And understanding your partner's type for doing this are so key to your connection. And you're going to thrive once you really put that on and put these tips on. So I thank you. I hope you'll check out the show notes for the Enneagram Relationship Intensive, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.